Hi, Carter. For math today, why don't you get out your remote learning notebook or a piece of paper or something that you can make a poster on. We'll make this poster together, and then I'll have you work on 2 different activities that the class is working on today. That way you don't fall behind. Go ahead and get out your notebook or something to write on if you didn't already do so. And at the top of your paper, go ahead and write these 2 words. The first one is the word factor. The second one is the word multiple. We're going to be focusing on those 2 things today. You've probably heard both of these and you probably know what they mean. Maybe you just don't know the actual definition. Let's start with factor. Factor is 2 numbers you multiply together to get a product. Now, product is just a fancy word for answer. Sorry, my handwriting's kind of messy on here. It's hard for me to write on my screen. Let me give you an example. That way you can kind of see it a little bit better. If I asked you to find the factors of 20, here's what we'd need to do. We'd need to think, what 2 numbers can we multiply together to get 20? I'll show you how. 1 times 20 is 20. Those are both factors. 2 times 10 is also 20. So those are also factors. 4 and 5 also are equal 20, which are factors. An example that would not work would be 3 times 6. We know that will never equal 20. It will always equal 18. So that one is not going to work. For example, if I asked you to find the factors of the number 8, you're thinking, what numbers can I multiply together to get 8? Well, we'd have 1 times 8. We'd have 2 times 4. And we can reverse those around the other way, making 8 times 1 or 2 times 4. But those are the factors, 1, 8, 2, and 4. The next thing that we're going to work on is multiples. Now, I know you might have not heard this word before, but basically multiples are just counting numbers. They're skip counting numbers. And I know that we did these in 3rd grade when we learned how to multiply. So let's start with 20 as an example. Over here, where we did the factors, that's where we multiplied. This time, we're going to start with a number, and we're just going to keep counting by 20. Those are called multiples of a number. I'll use that same example with the number 8, just like I did with factors. I would start with that number, and I would just start counting up. Skip counting by 8s. So factors are 2 numbers that you multiply by to get the answer, and a multiple is skip counting. Let's practice a few together, then I'll have you work on an activity here in just a second. I need to clear my whiteboard so I have a little bit more room to write. If I'm going too fast, you can always pause the video. Let's start with the number 10. And I want you to think of the factors and the multiples. Go ahead and try and list each one of those for me. And I'll show you the answer here in just a second. Remember, you can always pause the video. So factors are 2 numbers we multiply that are going to equal 10. The correct answers are 1 and 10. And 2 and 5. There's no other numbers that I can multiply together to get to 10. So this number 10 has 4 factors. There's 4 numbers that I can multiply to get the answer. Multiples, we're going to start with the number that I gave you, and we're just going to count by that number. Now, usually I'd only ask for maybe 5 or 6 numbers, but you could keep going. They're still multiples. Let's try one more, and then I'll have you do a different activity. This time, I want you to think of the number 16. I want you to think of the factors, 2 numbers that we can multiply, and multiples. Go ahead and write those in your notebook. I'm thinking about 2 factors that I can multiply to get 16. I know I can always start with 1 times 16. So there's 2 factors right there. I can think of 4 and 4. Now, since those are the same number, I'm really only counting one of them. I can also think of 2 and 8, which are also factors. Now you'll see that this number 16 has more factors than 10. So different numbers have different number of factors. Sorry, that's kind of messy, but hopefully you can see that. Now my multiples are just my counting numbers. So I'd start with 16, and I'm counting by 16, which would be 32, 48, 64, 80, 96. I could keep going, but as long as you list a few, that would be good. The next thing I'm going to have you work on is what we're going to do today. It's a multiples chart. So I'll send this to you in Google Classroom, or you can see it here in Google Classroom in a minute. It looks something like this. Here's the online version, and it has a whole bunch of dots on it. You might have to scroll. Here's what I want you to do. Each one of these right here is going to be one number. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's going to go all the way to 100. So you can see that on my next page. It's just all dots here. I would keep counting 41, 42, 43, 44, and so on. You can go ahead and write those in if you want to. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to start by counting by 2s using the color red. So for this part, I would color this dot since that's a 2. I would color this dot since that's 4, then 6, then 8, then 10. I would count by 2s using the color red until I get to the bottom of the page. Then I would do the same for 3s. I would start with yellow, and I'd do a yellow dot here since that's 3, then 6, then 9. You kind of get the point here. And what you'll start seeing is a lot of different colors. And what those are going to be multiples of that number. So this whole thing is going to be filled out here in just a second. Why don't you try your best to work on that? And if you have time, there's another worksheet that I'll attach. If this is too hard or too confusing on your iPad, I totally understand. Just let me know. That way we can have you work on something else.